Hi, I'm Gold Derby News and Features Editor Ray Richmond, and I'm here with Ramon Rodriguez, who plays the titular role of Detective Will Trent on the hit ABC police procedural Will Trent that also streams on Hulu. Ramon, you portray an eccentric Georgia Bureau of Investigation special agent on the show. What attracted you to playing this guy?
Well, I learned about this guy through the books. I had never read the books, but when they came to me with the project, I began reading Karen Slaughter's novels. And I have to say, actually, I listened to them. I didn't even read them. I listened to them. And as I kept hearing the description of this character and his behavior, and he's a little weird, he's a little left of center, he's a bit quirky, he's tough, he's very good at his job, but yet he's got a big heart. Um, I just thought those were a lot of interesting qualities. And on top of that, just a complicated human being, someone that has lived through a pretty traumatic childhood and was able to overcome all of that. And despite all that, and sort of use those experiences to help him at his job at sort of solving crime. And the way he looks at cases and at a crime scene is very specific. And there was a lot of that stuff that was kind of really compelling, and just an interesting layered character.
So you'd read the books or several of the books to get up to speed on
Yeah.
this before you said yes.
I did, yeah. I read several books and had a lot of conversations with Liz and Dan, the showrunners, who wrote the pilot. And, we talked a lot about it. I was very curious as to where they were thinking of taking the show and this character in the first season. And so we kind of really explored it and went back and forth on a lot of dialogue, so I could get a better understanding of kind of, do our tastes align? Do we see the same sort of thing for this type of show? I think one thing we all wanted to do, and that was all very conscious, was to try to do something really elevated um, in this genre, because it's crime. It's not uncommon. A lot of cop shows out there. How do we make something that feels unique, that feels a little different? And I think, tonally, we've done something really interesting where, yes, we'll deal with a case and there's a crime, but we'll touch on some really tough subjects through these characters, dyslexia and trauma and child abuse and addiction and some really heavy stuff. And then we'll sort of include and inject some really fun, silly stuff. We'll have a Hall and Oates scene where we're singing a Hall and Oates song and then sort of figuring out the case simultaneously, or we introduce a Chihuahua that kind of is an immediate way to show this character, Will Trent's heart, how he won't just leave this Chihuahua out and he's going to adopt this dog, even though he didn't want anything to do with it. He's absolutely begrudgingly and didn't want, very, very reluctantly, adopted this dog. And that there's just a lot of things that I think tonally we're able to pull off that are usually not. It's tricky. It's tough terrain to be able to navigate all those waters. And I think for the most part, the show's done a pretty good job of navigating all that.
Well, it's interesting because they really humanize you very early on in the show, and you're a very human guy. You're abandoned by your parents, and you had to navigate this harsh foster care system as a kid.
Yeah.
And we don't usually see, you don't get a lot of the background on the on the cop that early on in the show. So that
Right.
was then that I'm sure that had to appeal to you.
Yeah, it was really interesting to sort of know where we could go, right? So if you understand and if you have these sort of big nuggets of issues this person's been through, then it goes, okay, well, how do we exploit that? One of the things that we really found was really intriguing early on was this is a person who really has to have their life organized a particular way. Will Trent is someone that has his three-piece suit is an armor. It presents himself a certain way because he's hiding a lot of stuff on top of that. He's got a lot of secrets that not a lot of people know about. So we realized like he can be a little rigid, and so throwing him up against these guardrails is kind of fun to watch. So when we see him with the dog, and all these other instances where we get to sort of really push him against these things that make him uncomfortable, it's kind of really fun to watch as an audience. But yeah, everything that he's lived through, a lot of this complicated, childhood, the group home, the foster care system in Atlanta, not knowing, the identity issues this guy deals with, the trust issues, all of that stuff leads to like really fun things if you choose to mine it. And I think the writers are really willing to go there.
What's it like to sometimes be upstaged on screen by a chihuahua?
I have no problem. Literally, I mean, how could you not be? That Chihuahua, first of all, Blue Bell is I've did a movie with a dog before. You know, you're not supposed to do obviously film or television with animals or children or babies. This dog is a pro. I've done another other movie with a dog, and it was pretty well behaved. This I just never saw a Chihuahua be so well be. I mean, you might have experience with this, Ray. This Chihuahua is amazing, and by the way, lives the best life, better than you and I and anyone else I know. You know, flies in from Florida, does her scenes, gets these wonderful, delicious treats, and is just, you know, she's gone. In an hour, she knocks out her scenes, and she's, it's, if anything, that's the part I envy more than anything. It's like her life and how she's figured it out. I go, you know, Belle's figured it out. But, you know, very early on, we knew in terms of the script, there's, you know, to have a scene where you get to see a tenderness and another side of this character. Nobody really knew how big this would be, to be honest, that this dog would be so popular. But, you know, it ended up becoming a great vehicle for us to get another side of Will, which is really fun. You know, he's at one way at work with Faith, Amanda. He's another way with Angie, obviously, because of their history. But then he's with this dog. He just melts in a way that dogs do to humans. And, you know, so it's pretty beautiful to see someone like him who's been looking and really searching for family and some sort of stability. He kind of gets it with this Chihuahua in a really beautiful way. And I think that's why the audience also loves it. It's like, look at this bond and this relationship that's very unlikely. And it's a nice oxymoron between the two of them.
That's hilarious when you say she's such a pro. I just imagine this dog hitting her marks every time, you know, and like chopping on a
Seriously.
cigar and going, I've been doing this forever, kid.
Yeah, exactly. Get your line straight, kid. Next. You know, like, she's amazing. Yeah, I adore her. She's lovely, and honestly, you know, it's always fun when she's on set. She keeps it exciting.
So you're a Puerto Rican actor from the Lower East Side of New York. What do they call that? A New Yurican?
New Eurekan.
You're a New
New
Yurican,
Eurekan.
and in this show you work out of Atlanta and you have a Southern drawl. How did you approach that accent?
That was a big thing for me. You know, knowing the story of this character and his history, I wanted him to sound and resemble, you know, a bit of his environment of where he came from. And so I found this fantastic dialect coach. That was the big step. And when I did, he's from New York, and we spent a lot of time on just exploring and mining the sounds of the South and specifically Atlanta. And then we, you know, search for kind of what are some sounds that could be inspiring for this character. And we landed on Andre 3000. He's got a really sort of interesting Atlanta South sound. But again, it's just more of like an inspiration, a basis that we can look at or listen to rather and go, oh, here's what he sounds like when he says these particular words. How can we use that to help inform Will? And it's amazing what dialect does, for me at least, to crack a character wide open and understand them. They're because it really is, if you understand dialect, it's an absolute reflection of your experience, of your childhood, of your environment. And so that was really a way to crack in. And it was nice to also have that, you know, another dialect coach was really fantastic on set, just as a support system to keep me honest. Make sure that coffee doesn't start coming out. Coffee from New York. Like when you did Betty, you turned New York immediately.
So Andre 3000, that's the Outcast guy, right?
Correct. They're from Atlanta. Yeah.
That's unbelievable. That's because you really had to nail your audition, I'm thinking, Ramon, because you are not the kind of guy I would think you would think to cast for, you know, to be an Atlanta detective. You would be the opposite of that. So
yeah, no, I hear you.
You really must have allowed it.
You know, to be honest, this project came about because I did another project for Hulu. I did a pilot, fantastic pilot, called by based on another book, beautiful book named Olga Dies Dreaming. That pilot did not get picked up, unfortunately, and because right on the heels of that, the executives over there came to me and they offered me Will Trent. But to what you're saying, I passed on this project. I was not convinced that I was right for it. And it took me a while to not only really wrap my head around the character, but also like sort of this team, because, you know, when you do these things, you don't know, it could be for a long time potentially. And so you want to make sure you feel good about it. I had to make sure that I felt like I could really tackle this character honestly and authentically and bring something to him that's interesting, and that the team and everyone involved is all on the same page, because I might have a vision for it and they go, we had another, sort of whole other direction in mind. So luckily we all kind of, felt the same way about it. And I give them a lot of credit. They were super supportive, me going off, figuring out this dialect, bringing, the executives at first were a little nervous. They then started to understand it, because we each have our own stereotypes. You think Southern, you start making long drawly sounds, and I wanted it to be very specific and nuanced. I wanted it to feel lived in and not cliche. And again, specific to this character. So yeah.
So have you talked about that before, that you had turned it down originally?
Have I talked about it?
Yeah, I mean, have you talked about that in interviews before, that you turned it down originally?
Um, I don't know. I might have. I might have. I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
But but
But yeah,
but it all
I might have.
it was it because of your background? You just were like, what are you guys? I'm not a I'm not a Southern detective. What
It
are you
was a
talking
lot of
about?
things. Well, it's a lot of things when you make these decisions, especially in television. It's a big commitment. But because honestly, because of the executives involved, because I had history with them, because of the showrunners, which I had a lot of, we sort of were able to build this really great relationship. Liz, myself, and Dan Thompson. Um, and they have a really good producer on board as well, named Ali. Like, because of that team, it gave me a lot of confidence that, the thing that I think people don't talk about often in this industry is taste. And again, it could be the most, at least for me, the greatest opportunity. But if our tastes don't align, it might not make sense again. And luckily, I think we all sort of saw the same thing, and they were entrusting me to go and find, and I wanted to make bold choices. I wanted to do something that felt and looked different. I wanted to try to elevate, particularly on broadcast television. I go, how can we make it that it doesn't matter what this airs on? It feels unique and elevated and compelling, and everybody stepped up. But I was a constant sort of thing to push, and a standard I was trying to uphold, of saying, how do we make the best show possible? And that's across the board: costumes, casting, music, cinematography. How do we make a visual language that's compelling? Everybody stepped up. I have to give credit. Like, the director of the pilot was beautiful. His name's Paul McGuigan. The cinematographer was beautiful. Oliver DP'd it. So, it's all of those elements kind of coming together, and then, you hope for the best. You never know. All that could work and be in line, and it still may not work. It's just how it is. And I've learned to just make it, for me, it has to be about the work. And that's all I really care. Like, I put everything, it matters a lot to me when I commit to something. And so I'm all in. And then I kind of let go of it. And I go, if it's received, great. If it's not, great.
I think it's really interesting too, Ramon, that you're a Latino actor, but your character has no specific Latino identity. And I think
Correct.
I think that actually speaks well for the show, that you don't fall back on stereotypes or anything else.
That was critical for me. It's like, if I could do that, I think that, because that's the character, he doesn't know his background, and that's kind of amazing. And so might not so easily be identified, and he shouldn't. He should just kind of resemble his experience, where he grew up, his environment, without knowing necessarily, where he comes from, which I think is really fascinating. So yeah, that was a fun aspect, and again, it kind of keeps things ambiguous, and it also allows opportunity. You might want to explore that at some point.
So you've been acting for almost 20 years now, at least as far as your credits on IMDb. You were recurring on The Wire, and you were on The Affair, uh, among more than 2 dozen other credits. Yet suddenly, after nearly 2 decades now, you're an overnight sensation. How does that feel?
Exactly. I mean, it's nice to be able to work, and it's nice to be able to continue to work. It's really that simple. And so the fact that I'm granted, the opportunity to do another season of this, is lovely. The fact that people are enjoying it is wonderful. Feel pretty blessed and lucky to do what I do, and I love what I'm doing. And a big part of this process as well, by the way, and even early on, we were talking about the process of being involved. Being a producer on this was a huge thing for me. and it wasn't just the label producer. I wanted to know I'd be involved creatively as a collaborator, as a part of the team. And again, credit to everyone involved. They really held up to that. And it's been fantastic to kind of earn each other's respect and trust in the process of the choices you have to make as you make a first season show, even a pilot. And so that was a big part of the deal too. So, and and it's fun. I've always enjoyed that process of being, you know, as a producer, being able to make some of those decisions and choices and being involved in it.
Yeah, by the way, congratulations on being renewed for a second season,
Thank you.
which is certainly not automatic these days.
No, that's my first time.
Really congratulations. What's it like
My
being on a
first
hit
time.
series? Are you getting recognized a lot?
So funny. I'm fascinated with people's fascination about this. It's really because you're now that question's been asked a lot, and it's always so interesting, even by family, by the way. Yeah,
I'll bet.
it's but you know, it's I used to get recognized before. Now it's specifically for this, which is interesting. And yeah, I've had, you know, I was just in New York, and yeah, it's interesting that people, this is the thing that now people are talking about, and they go, oh, you know, Will Trent, or love your show, or this or that. And I'm like, cool.
Have
And then they
fans
go,
said
how's Betty?
it's always back on the dog. That's why you can't
I
work with
love it.
dogs and kids.
I don't mind. I will rock that dog. I would go do any show with Betty. She's awesome.
Have fans said anything about your work on the show that you've taken specifically to heart in terms of feedback?
You know, there's been a lot of different things that I've been a little like, it's cool to see it impact people at different levels. Some people are moved by or really enjoy that to see not only a person of color, like, you know, Latino being a lead, that's a big impact for my community and a lot of folks, which is beautiful. But also to see a person that's struggling with something like dyslexia. That is something that I know a lot, you know, that really has a lot of folks have sort of said thank you for you know, someone wrote, you know, a friend of the family was like, you know, my son is dyslexic. When he sees this show, it means everything for him to see himself in this way. To not see a Latino portrayed in a stereotypical way is a big deal. And like you said, even though the character is ambiguous, me, Ramon Rodriguez, I'm a New Yorker, I'm Latino. And it's a big deal, I think, for a lot of our people. And I've felt that, and I don't take that lightly at all. But I think, you know, even the relationships, you know, the Will and Angie stuff, people really go, man, that dynamic, and that, you know, that's a hard relationship. These two people trying to get over their past, and they're sort of triggering each other in ways that just feels really honest. So I think a lot of that stuff, people have been, you know, there's been a lot of takeaways from folks, which is cool.
In terms of being a Latino from New York, the first and the rare lead in a TV show, the first guy I thought of was Jimmy Smits. And
Love Jimmy. Yeah.
yeah, I was going to say, are you friends with Jimmy? Do you have a relationship?
Yeah, well, I know him. We've met a couple times, and you know, there's a lot of Latinos that I know that have been in the industry that I'm absolutely walking in their footsteps, and I'm very, very aware of that and grateful for that. So, you know, from Rosie Perez, John Leguizamo, I mean, a lot. Benicio del Toro, going back to Raul Julia, you know, Rita Moreno. There's a lot of folks that, you know, have really, I am on their shoulders, and I'm honored to be able to do that. And I'm doing my best to sort of pave that for others as well, and hold us up even higher.
Fabulous. Well, with that, we are going to wrap. Ramon Rodriguez, thank you so much for spending some time with us, and continued success on Will Trent. Good luck this Emmy season and in season 2, and take good care.
Thank you, Ray. Thanks for the introduction to Lola. What a doll.
He's talking about my dog. Thank you. and good luck with Betty in season 2.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Take care, Ray.